What started life as a DLC expansion for Uncharted 4 soon became the standalone title we all know today. Does its origin show, or is this another stellar entry in the franchise? Let's explore Uncharted: The Lost Legacy to find out. First introduced in Uncharted 2, Chloe Fraser has been a fan favourite character for some reason, and after an entire game and a half, she's back and in the starring role, along with Uncharted 4 villain Nadine Ross. But is the first Nateless adventure in the series worthy of the name? This has been one of my most anticipated games of the year, so let's not waste any more time and find out. The story takes place in India, where our duo are on the search for the Tusk of Ganesh, something that Chloe's dad was also on the hunt for many years before his death. Also after the Tusk is Asav, the calm and collected leader of an army. So combined with them and that Chloe and Nadine don't get along very well, this adventure isn't going to be easy. The story is good, but has some big problems early on. First, and biggest of all, there's no real introduction to the adventure. It begins with Chloe sneaking into the war-ridden side of India with a search for the Tusk already in motion. It feels like there should be some detail on how Chloe and Nadine met, but no, the story keeps going on from this point. I think some introduction would have been better. We do get some snippets of backstory during Chapter 4, which we'll get to, but it can feel a bit forced.
What, you should know? Heard you and those Drake brothers are close.
Okay, here's the bit where we mention the Drakes, and Nadine needs to spot a motive here. And Chloe needs to explain some stuff on her dad doesn't. However, as the game progresses, the story distances itself from these issues, and I found myself really into it. It's still not quite up to scratch with the other games, it might just be me, but some of Chloe and Nadine's banter doesn't feel as natural as before. But for a game they had a year or so to make, the quality is very impressive, and the pair do share some nice moments together. I'd be lying if I said the two leads were ever my favourite characters in the series, but they carry the game quite well, and I rarely found myself missing Nate. Then again, it's not as character-driven as 4, but the adventure makes for a fun romp more in line with the original 3, but without the treasure having a terrible truth to it, or it being something different to what they initially thought it was. This is just a race against Asav's forces, and it's really enjoyable. It does stumble a bit early on, but it really picks up towards the end. There's even some solid set pieces thrown in there. They can be a bit too short like in 4, but they're still exciting to play, and to be fair, the entire final chapter is one long set piece, and it is relentless. It's a great mix of the but that would be telling. So in conclusion, it's not the finest story in the franchise, thanks in part to the lack of a proper introduction, but as it continues, it becomes a great adventure for fans who still want more from the Uncharted universe. Though Nate isn't in the game, his style certainly is. Considering this game was originally DLC for Uncharted 4, it's no surprise that the gameplay is pretty much the same. As Chloe, you'll still be climbing, swinging and sliding around, shooting or breaking the necks of mercenaries, and solving puzzles. If the first 3 games could get away with having the same basic mechanics, this certainly can too. Platforming remains unchanged, except you'll be climbing things like a giant elephant statue, which really reminded me of Uncharted 2, but in a good way. Also, for whatever reason, even though I've reviewed 4 twice, I've never actually mentioned the Piton. I suppose that's because it's not used very often, but there is something satisfying about slamming it into cliff sides. Anyway, the platforming remains as fun as it always has been, and so does the gunplay and stealth, though there are times when you can get overwhelmed by enemies after getting caught, because the stages are more stealth orientated. It's a nitpick, but something I felt was worth mentioning. A lot of the gameplay is similar to Uncharted 4, that doesn't mean Naughty Dog's afraid to spice things up a bit. The main thing that you'll notice is that Chapter 4 takes place in a small open world environment, giving you the freedom to tackle these towers in any order you like. It's an interesting change of pace for the series, and a neat little addition. Chloe can also pick locks, which works fine, and can give access to weapons, most of them having never been handled by Nate, most notably a silenced pistol which adds a new layer to stealth. Also new is C4, which you can place down and detonate at your preferred time, which is a little underutilized but satisfying to use, particularly against his APC. There's also new puzzles, obviously, and they're nicely spread out across the campaign, with some really good ones in there that I had a great time solving. But even with these new additions, The Lost Legacy at times can feel like more of the same. But when the same is addictive gameplay, gorgeous environments, and outstanding production values from the best game of 2016, then I'm certainly not complaining. To conclude, this is a really solid entry in the franchise. Though far from perfect, particularly on the story front, this is still a really enjoyable title I can happily recommend to Uncharted fans, and if they carried on doing smaller games like this with other characters from the series, particularly Sully, I'm on board. Uncharted The Lost Legacy gets an 88%. For a game that began as DLC, it's amazing the level of quality that's on display, and it's definitely worth the £30 of admission.
Here we go!
Oh god, they're everywhere! Flop out of here! Thank god I won't have to do these anymore.